Hi again, Panther fans, and welcome to the Panther Insider Podcast driven by Ford. This is Dave Cohen, the radio voice of the Panthers. On this latest show, again, we go inside Georgia State basketball with head coach Jonas Hayes. On the show this week, we're recapping the Panthers' recent road trip to Huntington, West Virginia, and Conway, South Carolina. Georgia State dropped both games at Marshall, 77-68, and then at Coastal Carolina this past Saturday, 85-83, in a game that went to overtime. So the Panthers now sit at 9-11 overall, 4-5 in Sun Belt Conference play. And it's another huge week on the schedule this week. Home games against the first-place Mountaineers of Appalachian State on Thursday night. And then second-place Troy comes into the Convocation Center on Saturday afternoon. Basketball tickets available by calling the ticket office here at Georgia State, 404-413-4020, or you can purchase tickets online at georgiastatesports.com. And as always, if you've missed any of our previous Panther Insider podcasts, they're all available on the Apple Archives page. You can access that online at georgiastatesports.com. Once again this week, we're talking Georgia State basketball on the Panther Insider podcast. Let's welcome head coach Jonas Hayes to the Panther radio microphones. Road has not been kind to Georgia State. Couple of tough losses, as I mentioned, at Marshall and at Coastal Carolina. But you got a great opportunity this week. With all that being said, you got the number one Sun Belt team and right now the number two Sun Belt team coming into the Convocation Center this week. What an opportunity to make a statement in league play with these games Thursday and Saturday.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on again, David. Again, dropping games in the fashion that blows, all right? But I keep trying to tell our guys, you keep showing up, the table's going to turn. And I'll be honest with you, I've been very pleased with our response and our attention to detail in our practices and just our desire to get better. We will be the team that everybody wants us to be and thinks we need to be. It's just we got to go through these growing pains. We have a locker room committed, full of guys that are committed to getting better and being that team. And again, this coming week, it provides a phenomenal opportunity at home, and it sets the table for us nicely.
Well, you know, after the loss at Marshall, and you and I talked about this on the radio, you guys had a coaches team meeting back at the hotel. Obviously, that what is said inside those walls stays inside those walls. And then I noticed when we got back to Atlanta, as you addressed the team before they got off the bus, you said this is no time to become divided. My point is that a good bit of this game is played up here between the ears. It's the mental part of the game is as much a coaching challenge and a coaching is something that you have to coach as well as the physicality and the X's and O's part of it.
Absolutely. How many times you've heard coaches from all different professions that say the sport is 90% mental, 10% physical. How much time do you spend on that 10% as it relates to the 90%? And so that's where we are now, and we are in the grind of all season. We come off a tough stretch. But into each life, adversity will happen. You know, you have to figure out ways how to keep showing up. The table's going to turn. Keep showing up, giving it everything that you have, all right? You don't want to be placed in a situation where you have an opportunity and you're not ready for it, and we have an opportunity.
All right, let's recap the two games played this past week. First of all, again, back on the road to Huntington, West Virginia. The Panthers fly into Charleston, West Virginia. They bus over to Huntington, and this is a game where we're up at halftime, and DeJuan Odom hits a three-point half-court buzzer beater on his way to the locker room. You're up 30-29 at halftime. Unfortunately, we leave the Cam Henderson Center with a 77-68 loss. And, again, as you and I talked on the radio on the pregame show, by the time we got to Coastal, at least from where I sat, it seemed like the adjustment that they made, and I use that word in quotations, let's start pounding the ball in the paint to Nate Martin and the other big, and let's see if Georgia State can stop our post players. That's obviously, you go back and watch Appalachian State, go back and watch a couple of our previous games. It's almost as if our Achilles heel in the eyes of our opponents is our post defense.
That goes without, that's an area where we need to continue to try to improve. I think, our front court guys are making unbelievable efforts to get it done, but at the end of the day, it's about results, and are you able to keep your man and keep the other squad from being successful in what they want to do. And that's an area of attention we're going to continue to give a whole lot of our energy and efforts to, not to take away from any of the opponents we played, but that is something that we're going to have to get better at, and that's something we recognize, and that's getting a lot of our attention.
Yeah, because when you look at the post-game stat sheet, according to what I wrote down, Marshall had 6 points in the paint in the first half, finished the game with 32 points in the paint. So big difference in the first 20 minutes and the second 20 minutes. And again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record with regard to offensive rebounds, because as Danny Peters pointed out on the radio on the postgame, a percentage of those offensive rebounds are off missed threes, which means they're long rebounds, and so Marshall in this case would have a better opportunity to get those long rebounds like that. But they did have 13 offensive rebounds. And Nate Martin, who had, I think, 2 free throws in the first half for Marshall, ended up with a double-double, 15 points, 13 rebounds on 6 of 10 shooting, and just about all of it was right around the basket.
Yeah, and we're going to have to continue to figure out a way to defend our paint. We got to win the trenches, compete in the trenches. And again, another point of contention, a point of emphasis that you just alluded to, is we got to get back to being a really, really good defensive rebounding team and forcing our opponents only one shot at the bucket. But the great thing about that, Dave, all of that is fixable. And I do think we have a locker room full of men that's committed to getting that corrected, because we have a great opportunity. Great opportunity.
All right, Obina and Ochili Killen with 22.6 rebounds. How about DeJuan Odom's game, though? Look at his last 2 games. And we'll talk about the 30-point performance at Coastal Carolina, but he had 21 at Marshall, 21 points, 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal. For Jaden Turner, 8 points, 11 boards. He gets back to having double-digit rebounds. And he's, again, we've talked about it. He does a great job rebounding from a point where he's a little undersized against some of the guys he's matching up against.
Individual superlative, that's really, really good, but I'm most concerned about how you impact in winning. Both of those gentlemen had great games, but I will always challenge our guys collectively and individually. How are you impacting winning and doing your job? Be a star in your role and your responsibilities. That's what I'm most concerned about. But again, to our guys' credit, our guys are concerned about that too. And so we just got to keep pushing, keep stepping forward, keep putting one foot in front of the other. And get this thing, because the tables will turn.
Without saying anything that will come back to haunt you regarding talking about officiating, the game was tied at 54 at Marshall with about 10 minutes left. And if I remember correctly, it was Brendan Tucker driving into the paint, shot off the glass. It's good, or so we thought. They wave it off, and take me back through that, because you ended up getting a technical foul, which I think is the first one you've gotten at least this year as Georgia State's head coach. But it was a game-turning, in somewhat of a game-turning moment.
Yeah, and I apologize to the team. I was the village idiot, getting that technical and losing my cool. But speaking on that play, that is not an emphasis that the officials were making this season. That is the emphasis on the block charge call, and I just thought it was a missed call, and I thought the enormity of that moment kind of got the best of me, because I knew what that meant to be able to get a bucket and a foul on what clearly, in my opinion, was a block call. But we've had some discussions with our league offensive officials, and hopefully moving forward they'll get close to getting it right. And obviously the human error in the piece of being officiating is a part of that deal, and that's a extremely tough job to be able to do, especially in a situation like that. But when that has been made the emphasis, not an emphasis, that's the emphasis, you want to get that call right. Take
the technical out of it, even if there's no technical, just a foul. whatever it was, Thundering Herd ended up going on a 19-7 run from that point on.
Yep. And I didn't do our team any favors by getting that technical foul, and so that's something I've been thinking about here quite a bit. But I will always stand up for my guys and to keep those guys in a level head, to keep focusing on the game. I think I had to do what I had to do then, but the result wasn't what we wanted.
All right, we're talking with Georgia State's head basketball coach Jonas Hayes here on the Panther Insider podcast driven by Ford, inside Georgia State basketball. Coming up after this timeout, we're going to talk about the game at Coastal Carolina, and we will preview Appalachian State and Troy coming up. Again, following these words from Ford and Center Park Credit Union.
Wherever you go this fall, greatness starts in a Ford SUV. That's because Ford Escape, Explorer, and the spirited Bronco Sport SUVs have the power, cargo space, and smart tech you need for tailgating on game day, camping under the stars, fall festivals, romantic dinner dates, concerts, antiquing, pumpkin picking, weekend getaways, school plays. For great offers on these versatile SUVs, see your local Ford dealer today. Greatness starts here.
Center Park Credit Union, the official financial sponsor of GSU football, is proud to be a part of the Georgia State community and the Panther athletics program. Center Park provides members convenient financial services. In addition to online banking, mobile banking, and 7 Metro Atlanta branches, Center Park members have access to 5,000 co-op shared branches and 75,000 surcharge-free ATMs nationwide. To find a location near you, visit online at centerpark.org/contact, and that's park with a C. Not a member? Join today at centerpark.org. At Center Park, we help our members flourish. We're back in the Panther Insider podcast driven by Ford inside Georgia State basketballs. We talk with head coach Jonas Hayes. Georgia State coming out of Huntington, West Virginia. Flew back to Atlanta, hung around the Atlanta airport for a couple hours, got on a Delta flight to Myrtle Beach, and started getting ready for Coastal Carolina this past Saturday. The Panthers ended up losing that game, unfortunately, in overtime, 85-83. Your thoughts on that particular ball game before we dig deep into the stat sheet?
Yeah, it's just total disappointment down the stretch. Our decision-making down the stretch, both offensively and our defensive lack of connectivity or just finishing plays and finishing our scouting report, defensive responsibilities. It was all a combination where we just couldn't put two halves together, and I thought we played decent basketball again for 26 minutes, 27 minutes, and this our decision-making, and it just wasn't where it needed to be down the stretch. And I was disappointed in our effort down the stretch there.
Took a 10-point lead into the locker room at halftime.
Yeah, and but that speaks to the level of our ability. And then we just got away from doing what was necessary, really both on offensive and defensive end. But I think there's two things, if I can bring it down into just small concepts, is defensive lapses and not covering our defensive responsibilities and being a one-pass or zero-pass possession offensive team in the second half. And that just a combination of those two things is not great for the Panthers. And we came up short. Shouldn't have ever been in a game where it was that close. But to Coastal Carolina's credit, you know, they kept fighting. They kept showing up and possession after possession, and they got out of that with a win.
The two things from where I sat that they started doing better in the second half that were eluding them in the first half, number one, shooting threes, and number two, dumping it into the paint. Kevin Easley ends up with a double-double, 28 and 12 rebounds. And, you know, I'll let you comment on him. I was impressed with their freshman point guard, the Jacob Meyer kid. He ends up with 19 points, 10 rebounds. They don't go very deep. They don't play a lot of guys, so 3 of their 5 starters ended up with double-doubles because they play so many minutes, and the production is only going to come from, you know, so many players.
Great total team effort by them. And, again, we one of the better teams in the country in guarding the three. That didn't happen in the second half. And, again, our blown responsibilities when the ball got on the block, that spoke volumes, whether it be off of just a regular post feed or the extra looks that they were able to get at the bucket off of offensive rebounds. It was just a total mental lapse for majority of that second half. And to be honest with you, the way we were situated, I'm not necessarily thinking we deserve to win, and that's something we have got to continue to fight against, and just resting on our laurels and feeling fat and happy because we had a good half of basketball. You got to have the maturity to put two halves together, and you got to have a whatever it takes mindset, and we'll get back to that. We have guys in our locker room that's committed to getting there.
So a 10-point lead at halftime, 39-29. Coastal outscores us by 10 in the second half, 44-34. Again, a lot of it, shots that they were not making in the first half. And then the Mac Vicker kid, talk about this. I mean, the freshman, the 6'11 or 6'10 kid, however tall he is, gets fouled. And from where I sat, I couldn't tell if Tanari really even made any contact. It looked like Tanari was to his left, reaching out trying to block it, but from a body standpoint, the two never collided, never touched. Nonetheless, a whistle is blown, and the freshman goes to the line and makes all 3 free throws to tie the game at 73 and send it into OT.
Yeah, and from where I was sitting too, I'm not certain. That's a questionable call. But again, the officials got a thankless job. It's tough, but in those type situations, you would hope they would have. They would get it right, and regardless, I think from where I'm sitting also, we should have never been in that situation, right? And so we leave it up to chance that if he makes this call, yeah, shucks, we don't feel good about it, or we hoping he doesn't make it, whether it's a foul or not. We try to avoid getting in those situations, and again, to that young fella's credit, he knocked all 3 of those free throws down like good ball players do, and disappointed we didn't get the outcome.
Sometimes you can't see it visually, and I'm sure you've experienced this. As that's happening, and really even going back into that second half, it's almost as if momentum was a cloud, you could see the cloud shifting from our bench over to their bench, and just the way they were playing with a lot more, I don't want to say intensity, but both teams' backs were against the wall. There's a sense of urgency there, but all of a sudden it looked like their confidence level during the game in the second half started to pick up. And I know the crowd plays into that a little bit, and making shots plays into that a little bit. But again, if it had been a cloud, you could actually see it kind of shift from one end to the other.
Yeah, that's no question about that, Dave. And in the game, you try as coach to try to mitigate that as much as you can, and try to remind those guys, especially with the offensive togetherness, that we need the decision making, we need to play with one another, no 1-0 pass shot possessions, and then try to keep those guys focused at what our defensive game plan was, and those two things start playing in hand. We didn't have the offensive mindset, the offensive identity that we've created for ourselves the first half, and that led to us not being able to get key defensive stops, and it snowballed on us, and that momentum is real. It's real, and they took hold of it, and they got the result.
Dwan Odom, 30 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. Again, I know he would trade that in a heartbeat to leave Coastal Carolina with a W, but from an individual performance, that was an outstanding game for him.
It was an outstanding game for him, and that's the type of fella he is. That's the type of ball player he is. But unfortunately, this is not an individual game, and I keep challenging our guys to, you can find your productivity, find your level of productivity, but more importantly, how are you impacting winning? And that's where I keep our guys' mindset focused, not necessarily on individual superlatives, even though that was a great game, but what are you doing to impact winning?
So in our last 2 games, and I'm just pointing out these 2 guys, Nate Martin at Marshall, Kevin Easley Jr. at Coastal Carolina, have kind of shown the rest of the Sun Belt what they can do that is going to cause us problems.
And they are basically calling us out. Our league is calling us out as to, okay, Georgia State, you better get better at that, because that's what we're going to do. We have exposed you, and if you cannot make a response to that area right there, your tail is in trouble. And we're going to take that challenge, and we have no choice but to get better. We got 9 league games left, and we have no choice but to get better.
A little bit of a with 2 home games this week, sometimes I've referred to it as a gauntlet. We've got a little bit of a gauntlet coming up. and thankfully we're at home, as we said, for most of them. Appalachian State, again, at 17-4, 8-1. We saw them, 2 weeks ago up in Boone. 77-68 loss up there. Their post players, if I remember, had 41 of their 76 points. That's kind of where I started, where, at least in league play, started to notice teams making that adjustment. Practice this week as you get ready for this one. And then Troy coming in here, who we have not seen yet, on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that's going to be a concerted effort. All hands are going to be on deck for this Thursday evening's game. And again, you just brought it up. People are starting to check off on Georgia State. Okay, well, we know where they're the weakest, and they're basically calling us out. And we're going to take a stand to that challenge. And make no mistake about it, our guys know it. They're going to be reminded of it every single day.
Well, the Spillers kid, Trayvon Spillers, had 23 and 13 against us. Justin Abson and Donovan Gregory. Gregory is one of those players. They list him at 6'3". He plays like he's about 6'6", 6'7", because he's built kind of like you and Jarvis. Tough to get in the lane against him. And if he wants you out of the lane, he's going to bump you out of the lane.
I'm going to challenge our guys. When is enough is going to be enough. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired of people getting their career nights on us. At some point in time, you got to stand up.
All right, so right now Appalachian State right in front of you. Any thoughts on Troy? Haven't really seen too much about them, but they are the second-place team, as I said at the top of the podcast. What a great opportunity to kind of to stand up and make a huge Sun Belt Conference basketball statement this week with the number 1 and number 2 teams coming into our building.
Yeah, outside of taking a glance at the standings, I'm 1,000% all hands on deck trying to play the best 40-minute brand of basketball we can on Thursday. And we're ready to get to Troy when we get to Troy, but it's all hands on deck for App State.
All right, and again, just to recap, it's the physical part, but it's keeping everybody moving in the same direction and moving in the same direction from a positive standpoint. That's half the battle.
Coach Dave Cohen, you are absolutely right.
I've been accused of being a coach before over the years.
Yeah, you're right, and that's been my goal over the next few days, just making sure everybody understands the value of keep showing up, keep putting one in front of the other, control what you can control, and move forward.
By the way, one other question, as you may have gotten, a few people have messaged me, DK. What's his status? I know in the 2 games there really wasn't an opportunity, an ample opportunity to get him into the game, but he's available.
He is available. He's starting to a little bit. He had a little setback, nothing major, we don't think, and so it's going to be like a game-to-game type deal, and we want to just be fair to him and his development physically. Before we move forward and throwing him out in a situation where he's not either mentally prepared or physically prepared. And so we're very cautious with him right now.
And lastly, from an injury standpoint, everybody seems to be healthy. We seem to be going into this, what I call this tough stretch of games, home and even on the road as you look forward, in pretty good shape health-wise.
Yeah, we got a full bill of health, and we're thankful for that. And so we'll be ready to go and lace them up on Thursday.
All right, Coach, as always, appreciate it. Best of luck this week. Thursday night, Appalachian State. Saturday afternoon, Troy. And we will talk again on the podcast next week.
Thanks. And Dave, I would also like to say this. I want to just appreciate our fans. The support you've given us through this tough stretch has been really, really good. Keep your support strong. Your guys are working hard. They're working their tails off. And we will become the team that you want us to be. I can promise you that.
All right, we'll see you at the Convocation Center this week.
Let's go Panthers.
All right, I want to thank Georgia State's head basketball coach Jonas Hayes joining us again this week on the Panther Insider podcast driven by Ford. Reminder to Panther fans, basketball tickets available. Just call the Georgia State Athletics ticket office at 404-413-4020. You can also purchase tickets online at georgiastatesports.com. As always, we're back talking Georgia State basketball with Coach Hayes again next week on the Panther Insider podcast driven by Ford. So this is Dave Cohen saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the GSU Convocation Center. And as always, go Panthers!